who is joining us for tonight for taking the time to be part of the town hall. We appreciate the time that you took to register, the time that you're going to take tonight to share any lingering last-minute questions that you might have, and for tuning in to allow us to fill in the blanks. Amanda already introduced tonight's panel. My name is Logan Tutel. I am the chairman of the Long Range Planning Task Force, and I will moderate the conversation tonight. Joining me for tonight's conversation, Suzanne Dalton, Fraternity Director of Chapters, Carol Sanders, who is a member of Region 7, Kappa Province, Ella Gomer Vieira, a Task Force member and Assistant to the Director of Chapters, also a Region 7 member, and Molly Bechtel, Task Force member and PDC Pi North, also part of Region 7. We know that we have many Kappa friends from around the country who are joining us on the last town hall, and we'd like to welcome you tonight as well. Our plan for tonight is to spend the opening 10 minutes sharing why we have put forth this plan and some background as to how we arrived at this point. The remaining 80 minutes will be spent on answering the questions you have sent in via the registration process. If we get through all of the questions from the registrants tonight, we will gladly take additional questions from the attendees. Please feel free to type more questions into the window at the bottom right of your screen. And please remember that the panelists cannot see the questions that you're asking. So if I don't answer your question, please don't be offended. I just can't see it. Amanda sends them to me afterwards if I don't get a chance to answer them on the call tonight. So let's go ahead and get started so we make sure that we have plenty of time for conversation in addition to the information that we are sharing with you. Many of you asked kind of how we arrived here and why is this important? Why do we need to do this now? And the first reason is that we believe we must meet the needs of our alumni and undergraduate members. The new plan will provide increased support in all content areas of the fraternity, and it will also allow our organization to be more agile in responding to critical issues of today's higher education and Greek environment. Our campuses are facing issues regarding campus carry laws, campus security authority, and we're also seeing higher education demands for immediate response from our volunteers. Second, we believe we have the opportunity to better utilize and develop the talents and skills of our membership. The plan that we have proposed makes roles more manageable through the increased number of volunteers and concentrated work portfolios. I know that there have been volunteers out there who have asked why are we just simply not increasing the number of PDCs or PDAs to better meet the needs of our chapters and associations. And what we're seeing is that those jobs are not manageable because if you are that volunteer, you have to know too much information. You have to know a little bit about everything. And our fix to that solution is to create content specialists. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But we feel that in today's current volunteer climate, this is the best option for our organization. That instead of asking for volunteers to know about membership and standards and risk and philanthropy and programming and leadership, that if we can create concentrated work portfolios, that we're going to make that job more meaningful for our volunteers, and that's going to increase our ability to find quality volunteers. I think a lot of us who have volunteered or who have been asked to do something, whether we're an undergraduate or an alum, we don't want to say no. And even though we know that it might be the wrong job for us, whether it's the knowledge that we need or the skills that we need or the time that we have, we're afraid to say no. And the task force feels very strongly that the plan we have put forth will allow the right people to be in the right jobs, and that people can focus on areas that they are passionate about or that they have expertise in, or an area that they just might want to grow in. They might know a little bit about it, want to get their foot wet, if you will, in the volunteer opportunities that CAPA has to offer, and we're going to be offering more and more of those jobs with the new proposal, the new structure. Thirdly, we believe that volunteers should lead the organization with roles that are less time-consuming and manageable, more manageable. We have been, and we always will be, a volunteer-directed organization. But in order to be a volunteer-directed organization, we have to have volunteers. Right now, the average time commitment of a fraternity council member is 30 to 60 hours a week. That's a full-time job, and then some. And it's a volunteer position. Our average time commitment of our regional directors and province directors is 20 to 40 hours per week. And I apologize about the echo. If you can hear it, let Amanda know, and then we'll see if we can fix it. So if you are a regional or province director, we're looking at, again, a part-time or a full-time job as your volunteer job. And as we see more and more women working part-time or full-time, it's very difficult for them to also commit to a part-time or full-time volunteer job. The task force really feels strongly that we need to shift the focus of our volunteers' time from daily operations, those tasky things, to the proactive strategic planning for the future of our organization. I think very few of us got into CAPA volunteering because we were excited about checking things off of our to-do list or a task list. We got into this to give back to CAPA, to mentor, to advise, to better the organization, not to complete a checklist of tasks. And a lot of our volunteer jobs have become that. And lastly, we believe we must perpetuate CAPA's ideals. We believe that the new structure does this by expanding programming for alumna and undergraduate members. We believe that the new structure will increase knowledge of our history and ritual, that it will increase extension opportunities and success. There have been many times where we have missed out on an extension opportunity because we did not demonstrate enough support for our chapters. And lastly, that we have an opportunity to bridge the gap between alumna and undergraduate members in all areas of the organization. And so for these 4 reasons, this is where the task force was coming from. These are things that we kept in the back of our minds as we worked on this proposal. And before we move on, I want to talk about the volunteer picture. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, this current volunteer climate. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has shared that the volunteer rate for women is decreasing and has been over the last 5 years. Most recently, it dropped from 28.3% to 27.8%. The good news is that women between the ages of 35 to 54 with higher education are most likely to volunteer. For CAPA, this is the demographic that reported being too busy in our Women Who CAPA survey in February of 2015. So this was a reinforcement for us that we're doing the right thing, that we are making our volunteer jobs smaller, more manageable, less time-consuming to meet this demographic. This is the group of women that are most likely to volunteer if the job is right for them. And we're increasing the opportunity and the probability that CAPA women, CAPA volunteers will find the job that's right for them. The age demographic that volunteers the least is a demographic of 20 to 24. This is an age group that we rely on for our chapter officers, because when it comes down to it, our chapter officers are volunteering their time to fill that leadership role. And it's also a demographic where we pull a lot of our advisors from. So how can we increase volunteer rate in that demographic? By offering more support, by saying, if you are the philanthropy chairman for your chapter, you and your advisor are going to have more support, because we have this philanthropy specialist who is an expert in her field, in her content area, and she's going to help you. And so that, we feel, will also increase volunteerism with that demographic. The last statistic here, women give an average of 50 hours per year. And when we go back to the fact that our fraternity council is 30 to 60 hours a week, and our regional and province directors are 20 to 40 hours per week, we are way, way, way above a national average. The average number of hours given by volunteers in Greek organizations is also 50 hours per year. So again, we're above the norm here, which I think oftentimes we want to be above the norm. This is probably not an area that we want to be above the norm. So where did this conversation begin? There was a resolution at the 2012 Biennial Convention from Mary Zizell, who is a member of the Gamma Gamma chapter, and she asked the fraternity to examine the volunteer structure. The convention body agreed with her and voted on this positively on this resolution. Part of the resolution was to have the task force examine the current nominating committee. The Long Range Task Force did that, and you can see that part of our report on the womenwhokappa.org site, and it's pages 10 through 11 of our report. And just to summarize, the Long Range Planning Task Force did not make any major recommendations to the nominating committee at this time. After that resolution, the Fraternity Council appointed the task force in January of 2013. And one of the things that we considered was the work of a long-range plan task force from 2000. That task force was charged with the same question, to look at the volunteer structure. And so what we're seeing is that there is still a need for us to look at what we're asking our volunteers. So here is a picture of the long-range plan developers. You'll probably see some familiar faces in there, especially if you are from Region 7. There have been comments about this task force that it is not seasoned enough or knowledgeable enough to have developed a plan of this magnitude. And when you look at these fine young ladies, you'll see that there are current and former fraternity council members, regional directors, province directors, assistants to council, foundation board of trustees, alumni association presidents, advisory board chairmen, chapter presidents, and leadership consultants. These women are also high school teachers, directors in large higher education institutions, corporate businesswomen, and board members with a variety of nonprofit organizations. With all of these experiences and the background of the women on the task force, plus the feedback from our members, plus the knowledge of our NPC peers, successes and failures, plus the demands of higher education partners, plus the struggles of membership organizations, that all of that was factored into the development of the current proposal. Here is the current proposal as represented by the organization chart. And when our task force met, we looked at this from the top, and we also looked at it from the bottom. And we looked at our advisors, and the task force felt very strongly that The advisors are really the front line, that they are the ones that are working with our chapter women, that they are helping our chapter women guide, to lead, to follow CAPA's policies. And we wanted to be able to provide those advisors with more support, with improved support. Then on the top side, we looked at the Fraternity Council position descriptions. And so much of those descriptions were those day-to-day operational things, the tasks, the things that you don't go into volunteering for. And so we thought, well, how can we change that? How can we improve the quality of this volunteer job for Fraternity Council? And so when we looked at it from the bottom up and when we looked at it from the top down, this is what we ended up with, because we wanted to allow Fraternity Council to really become the strategic visionary head of our organization. And right now they don't have time to do that because they're doing so many of the other day-to-day operational things. Then how do we get advisors more support? Then we create these specialists, people who are passionate and experts in their content field. So people who are passionate about programming or leadership development or academic excellence. So that's how that's how we came up with this. We also have the content directors, and the content directors are those boxes down the left. Those are women who are going to lead a team of content area specialists. So the academic excellence content director would have a team of 14 specialists, and each of those 14 specialists would be assigned to a different district across the country. Same with the advisory board content director. She has a team of 14 specialists that are working one per district. At the head of each district is a district director, and this is a person who is really a facilitator for her district. You know, some skills that she would need to have. She would need to be a good communicator. She would need to be able to have that tough conversation, to be able to resolve conflict, to really kind of know what's happening in her district with her chapters and associations, and to be able to allow the specialists excuse me, to do their job without getting too micromanaging, I guess, is what I'm looking for there. But she's also the one that can bring different specialists together to assist with a chapter issue or to assist with an alum association issue. So she just is kind of the glue that's going to hold that district together. Then on the right-hand side, we have our standing committees and our special committees. Some of those special committees might look new to you, and I will have the opportunity to talk about them a little bit later on in the presentation. A lot of people have also asked about what are other NPC groups doing and how does CAPA compare? Well, there are 26 NPC groups out there, and each one has their own structure. There are about 5 to 6 groups that are voting on board changes this summer. Obviously, CAPA is one of them. In total, if all of those pass, approximately 17 to 18 would have a governance model, which is what we are proposing. That's what the task force is proposing, where you have that fraternity council that is charged with that visionary and strategic planning aspect. Those that are already using a governance model have seen increased volunteer engagement. That is due to more volunteers willing to serve in those smaller roles. It's also because it's also increased the type of expertise being contributed to the organization. Of the NPC groups, Phi Mu is the closest to our proposed model. Theta and Tri Delta are the other groups that have the longest standing governance models. So now we'll get into the questions that we have received as part of the registration process. And one of those questions was about the term district and why are we using district and not province or region? the task force spent a lot of time discussing this, and this was not a decision that we made lightly. But we did end up with the term district because we really wanted to create a clean break from a province director and a regional director when we were talking about the district director, because we felt that the skills of a district director were different than a province director or a regional director, and so we wanted to do that. I think that for a lot of people, actually, the term that has the most meaning is the Greek alpha terminology. So the Pi province would become the Pi district, or Kappa province simply becomes Kappa district. So we're still retaining that Greek alpha identification, but we're just changing province to district. We also wanted to create geographic areas that were relatively the same size in terms of the number of chapters and the number of associations, and we were able to do that by going to 14 districts. So there's an average of 10 chapters per district and 22 associations per district. So our next question was about communication and how can Fraternity Council stay in touch? And Amanda or Ella?
Logan, Ella, I'm on the line. I didn't know if you wanted to check in and see if we had questions in the meantime, or if we wanted to go ahead and keep on going.
I was going to throw this to Ella.
All right. Happy to handle this one. So the question that we've received, it's actually a combination of two questions, but the summary is, if Fraternity Council positions have no direct responsibilities, how will they stay in touch with members and maintain lines of communication with content and district directors? The way that the reporting lines will work is that each of the specialists in each district will report directly up to their subject matter content director. And the specialists will also report into their district director. So not only will the district director, as the air traffic control person for their area, know everything that's going on in each of the different content areas, we'll have a consistent message across the fraternity in each area, like standards or alumni relations, because those women are reporting to the content director, setting all of the policy and direction in those areas. The content directors and the district directors report directly into Fraternity Council. And specifically, the district directors will each report into one of the vice presidents. So there are 4 vice presidents that don't have specific duties outlined, but those 4 vice presidents will be overseeing a group of district directors. And that gives those district directors someone to escalate issues to when they get out of the realm of kind of the garden variety problems, or when they need to bounce new ideas off of someone. Fraternity Council will continue to be engaged with the membership as well by hearing from leadership consultants, specialty task forces, surveys like the member survey that just went out. So broad communication along with district and content area communication will be an important part of the communication structure. The committees, as they do today, will also continue to report up to Fraternity Council. And council is where, at the end of the day, the ultimate buck stops, both from a fiduciary standpoint and from an operational standpoint. The idea is that we will have very well-trained and equipped volunteers who can handle most of the issues at the district level. And with that dotted line to the VP, we make sure that there is still that escalation as things come up, so Fraternity Council is not out of touch with problems that are going on. And just as in a professional setting, a director remains the owner of a content area, but then there's a person above them in case they need to talk through bigger topics. So that's a little bit about communication. And specifically, diving a little bit deeper, under our current system, each chapter and association has one point person, which is usually the province director, and that's how we're maintaining consistent communication right now. And so in the future, that point person is ultimately the district director, because we want to continue the communication and consistency. For one key tool in making sure that chapter communication is consistent is a program called Key Reports. It's actually a web interface that's been in place for about 4 years. And right now, there's a significant amount of chapter reporting that actually happens through this interface. Academic excellence reports are there, philanthropy reports are there. If a chapter is on council action, all of those terms are visible there. So everyone in the district will be using Key Reports as an information hub. And with the district director running air traffic control, along with that tool, everyone's going to be in the loop with what's going on across the district, in addition to regular communication throughout the team. For alumni on a day-to-day basis, there is a alumni relations specialist on the hub paired with the district director as their day-to-day point people, sharing with the content specialists. So this helps people be more aware of what resources there are on the wheel, as an alumni relations specialist will be able to help associations plug into the content specialists and also allow them to be a point person in helping to share good ideas and share successes with other groups within the district. And ultimately, with more eyes, hands, ears, everyone on board looking at the information that's being reported from our associations and from our chapters, we have more of an ability to act on the information that we're getting. In the current structure, a province director will be receiving reporting in a variety of subject matter areas. And that one person who, in a lot of ways, has to be a jack of all trades, can often have focuses in multiple areas, with multiple women available to jump in and deal with specific issues and to know their subject matter area inside and out. You have an expert dealing with those questions or those brainstorming sessions versus someone who has had to know a little bit about a lot of things. So ultimately, in the future, the communication is stronger because our women will be working with subject matter experts in each area. The next page, and I'm not sure if we can click to it real quick. So yeah, Key Reports. So this is just to give you guys a snapshot of what Key Reports looks like for chapters. There is in the development plan for this, I believe, a Key Reports interface for alumni associations as well. But this will give you an idea of the type of information that our volunteers have access to right now for each chapter. Chapters also have access to this interface, and so they're seeing everything from reminders to what their chapter status is, their rosters, the reports that are due, anything that is potentially overdue with relation to initiation. There's grade history in here, reports on philanthropy, recruitment, all of those different things. And as I mentioned, there will continue to be more and more reporting function through this important interface. All right.
Ellie, you want to do this one? Do you want to do this one? Do you want me to?
Sure. Go for it.
Okay. So how does the plan, or how will it affect the day-to-day needs of our chapters? And we believe that with the new plan that there will be sustained consistency through the district directors as well as the content specialists. And as Ella was talking about the key report on this chapter, or on this screen, chapter officers, chapter advisors will have access to this. They have access to it now. All of the specialists will have access to this. The district director will have access to this as well. And so we just really see that the communication is going to increase, and that is going to improve our chapters. We sometimes don't know what's going on with our chapters or even our associations, and this has really allowed us to see what areas we need to improve in, where we need to provide more programming and more support for our chapters. You know, so when a chapter needs initiation assistance, we'll be able to see that here. And so that ritual and history specialist will be able to step in and really kind of walk them through that and help them out. And we've had a lot of success with the key reports this last year. So, Amanda?
Yes, I'm here.
This might be a good time to stop and answer any questions. Or I don't know if Carol wants to add anything.
I would love to add something. I'm the philanthropy chairman, and I had the opportunity to select 14 amazing women to serve as philanthropy specialists. And so they are each assigned a specific area of the country to oversee. It's by states. And they are the contact now for the chapter philanthropy chairman, as well as associations. And it truly is working amazing well. They're having a great time. They're putting, as content specialists for philanthropy, they're putting in just a few hours a week, some of them more, some of them less. They are able to access key reports, so they are able to touch back with their chapter philanthropy chairman and also advise associations. I still receive, because associations aren't on key reports, I receive all the association year-end summaries, and I then send those to the philanthropy specialists, and they contact the Alumni Association and comment on their year-end report. So from my perspective as the philanthropy specialist or philanthropy chairman, having those 14 specialists has been just a real blessing for me and what I'm doing.
Thanks, Carol. Amanda, Yes.
Sorry, look, and this is Ella. I had one other thought to tack on to Carol regarding how this plan could affect the day-to-day needs of our chapters. And I think it's important to note that with the evolution of technology over the last 20 years and the environment that our chapter women have grown up in, the way that they communicate and the speed with which they communicate is so fast, and they expect to hear from someone when they reach out very, very, very quickly. And in the current structure, with province officers and regional directors being kind of their only real go-to people on a regular basis, it gets difficult sometimes to get that extremely quick response. And so having those specialists and having that chapter services team at headquarters, I can't stress enough, will allow chapter women to get that really expeditious communication that they desire and that they expect from us. And by having those women available, will hopefully head off issues at the pass, be able to respond to even universities more quickly, but having more hands on deck will just help keep us plugged in on a timely basis with everything happening with our chapters. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Oh, no, I think that is great, and thank you for popping in with that. Okay, so another one of the questions that we got was regarding alumni associations, and the task force really feels that this is going to be a huge support for our alumni associations, especially those that are already struggling. When we look at CAPA statistics in terms of our alumni, 9.5% of alumni are active in their associations versus 10 years ago when it was 13.5%. So we've seen a huge decrease in the number of women who are participating in their alumni associations. 28 years ago, there were 4,000 more paid alumni in our database than there are today. So we really want to help our associations, and we feel that with the new structure that our association presidents, their vice presidents, their membership chairs, their philanthropy chairs, whoever they have as their officers are going to get more improved support, just like our chapter officers are, our alumni association officers are as well. We typically see that associations, when they when they come to meetings, whether it's convention or regional leadership or the old province meeting, everybody wants to increase membership, because if you have a greater membership pool, then you have a greater pool of women to fill leadership roles. And then you have a greater opportunity to go out and connect with the local chapter, or to connect with a chapter that's not local. And so how do we do that? Well, with the new structure, we have that support. We have a membership specialist who can work with the programming specialist to say, you know, South Bay Alumni Association, your membership is dropping. We've taken a look at your programming. Have you thought about doing this? Or, you know, we talk about, you know, some people have said that they're two, chapters and associations are two totally different things. And in some ways they are, but in a lot of ways they're not. And when we look at recruitment in our chapters and what we ask our chapter women to do, that should be what Alumni Association women are doing. That we should greet people at the door when they come to a meeting. That we should take them around and introduce them to different people. That we should help them find a connection. That we should invite them back to our next event. And so those recruitment skills that we promote and we learn as undergraduate women, we should be using as adult women as well. And that's where that membership specialist can come in. If, you know, especially if we're looking at, you know, practicing conversation skills, that the Alumni Association could come in and help chapters with that if there was a need. In addition to that, we are proposing the creation of special committees that would help at-risk associations and or chapters, and that this committee would be like a one-on-one, that they would really do some hand-holding and some TLC with at-risk associations or an at-risk chapter, and the identification of that at-risk would come from the district director with, in this case, the recommendation probably of the alumni relation specialist. We have an alumni relations specialist in every district who will work directly with associations. That's probably the closest equivalent to a province director of alumni in the new structure. We have that association and chapter development committee that will also help, plus the district director. So a lot more support, and Ella, you know, was talking about that with our chapters, and it's true for our alumni associations as well. Amanda, I just realized that I forgot to come back to you to see if there were any questions.
No problem. We do have a few. One is, if you could clarify, who initiates key reports?
Ella or Suzanne, do you guys want to answer that question?
Sure, this is Ella. So chapter officers across the board initiate key reports per se. Each chapter officer logs in and she has that dashboard where she can see what's happening with her chapter, but she also goes in and fills out her report. From there, it's a kind of a pull system. So headquarters sets up access. Advisory boards, house boards, everybody have access, or certain members of those boards have access to key reports to go in and see the content as well. All of the district content, directors would have access, so would the specialists. So headquarters sets up the access, but most of it is either input from chapter officer reports where they put the information in directly, or the different systems at headquarters, like membership services, for instance, will directly input the rosters from their membership system. So it's kind of initiated from a lot of different directions, if that answers the question.
Thank you. Amanda, should I continue on?
We do have another question.
Okay.
If someone is in regular communication with their PDC, would they then be talking to their district director instead?
Not necessarily. I think it would depend on why we are in constant communication with a province director of chapter. So it could be, but it could also be if we're in constant communication with our province director of chapters because of standards issues. Then we're going to be in constant conversation with our standards specialist. Or if it's academic excellence issues and we're working toward, bringing up the GPA, then we're going to be working with that specialist. So I think it really depends on what the situation is. Ella, Suzanne, I don't know if you guys want to add, or Carol, if anybody wants to add to that.
Yes, I think it has everything to do with what the particular area of focus is. The district director will be managing the overall picture, but if there is a focus letter in place, for example, whatever the areas that need to be concentrated on in the focus letter will be managed by those separate content specialists. So the chapter will be in communication with the standards specialist, for example, if there are issues with the standards process, or with the risk management specialist or the philanthropy specialist, or whatever the particular area is that needs improvement or particular focus.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Logan, we did have one more question that came in.
Okay.
And this question is regarding a map of how the districts will be divided. You know when that will be shown?
It's not part of tonight's presentation, but you can view it on the womenwhocapa.org site. And I should know this, but there's 4 kind of things across the top. It says the latest and something. It's the second one down. You can see the regional map there.
You can click under the big idea, and then there's a link that says proposed districts.
Thank you. I would look at it, except then you would all see my messy desktop. For the most part, so while everybody is frantically searching for that, for the most part, the districts are the same as today's provinces. So Kappa province remains the same. Pi province remains the same. The exception to that, because we're moving from 16 provinces to 14 districts, Alpha and Rho would be combined into Alpha District, and then New was broken up into 2 or 3 different districts. But again, that was to keep those districts relatively the same size. There were also some states, Pennsylvania, for example, was in 2 different provinces. They were partially in beta and partially in gamma, and so we moved them into the whole state of Pennsylvania into 1 district. So, but yeah, that map is on the womenwhocapa.org site. Okay, so the next question was about our members having a voice under the new structure if content specialists are not elected. The long-range planning task force was very purposeful and specific in how many elected positions we wanted to see. We felt that under our current structure that there's kind of this division, that people who are elected versus people who are not elected, and that sometimes there was a kind of a hierarchy or a rank there, even though some of those positions might be doing relatively the same thing. And so we wanted to kind of eliminate that. We wanted to eliminate that division, and so that is why the only positions that are elected under the new structure are Fraternity Council and the district directors. In terms of having a voice, I think there are a lot of different ways that our Kappa members have a voice. Our chapter women have a voice at chapter. Our alumni have a voice at their association meetings. There was a member survey that just went out came from Fraternity Council, and that is a way for your voice to be heard. Voting at convention is a way for your voice to be heard. Attending trainings or meetings as a way for your voice to be heard. For our chapter women to meet and be able to talk to leadership consultants is a way for their voice to be heard as well. Participation in task forces or special committees would be a way for people to have their voice heard. But I also think ultimately that working with the specialist is going to be a way that people have to be heard, and the specialists are going to be working and creating relationships with people on the ground, so our chapter women and our alumni association members. And so the task force really feels that we're going to be able to hear from more people now, that more voices are going to be heard under the new structure. Another question kind of along the same lines was about appointed positions. The task force is not proposing any term limits for appointed positions, which is no different than our current structure. So if you are appointed to a position today, then you can serve in that position until Fraternity Council chooses not to appoint you. So yes, one person could be appointed to the same position for several years. Our specialists might be moved from one district to another. If you, you have a strength and you live in California, but let's say Delta Province needs your expertise, then you might be appointed to serve in Delta Province. So it's kind of like we're looking for an all-star team. We want the 14 best specialists in this content area, and not because of where they live, but because of their skills and their content and you know, what they can do with this position. And so, you know, you might not serve in your district the whole time. You might move somewhere else. Along these same lines, some people have asked about the appointment timeline, and so the task force has proposed this. So June of an even year is when we have convention, and at convention is when we elect Fraternity Council, and we would elect the district directors. One of the first tasks then after convention of Fraternity Council would be to make the appointments of the content directors, so those boxes down the left-hand side of the organization chart, as well as the committee chairmen. So those committees, the standing and the special committees, which were on the right-hand side of the org chart. Then in the spring of the odd year following convention, the specialists would be appointed. So for those of you who are remember, you know, we have typically elected province directors in the spring of the odd year. The specialists would be appointed at that time. And then the specialists, the content directors, the district directors, and Fraternity Council would attend a training meeting in June. So today, under the current structure, we call that the Associate Council Seminar, or ACS for short, and that's where we bring our newly elected province directors of chapters and of alumni, and we train them. And in this new model, it would be the specialists, the content directors, and the district directors who would come for that training. And our proposal for that training is that on the first day of training, the specialists meet with their content director, and then on the second day, the specialists meet by district with their district director. So we get the content training, but we'll also have the opportunity to talk about our district and what are our goals. What is, you know, what is our strategic plan for our district for the next biennium?
All right, I'll take this one. This is Ella again. Since there will no longer be a chapter team, what group will have the responsibility for chapter evaluations as we do them in the current structure? So a key part of the chapter evaluations in the current structure is the leadership consultant team. who at the end of their year of traveling are able to sit down and have a fresh, boots on the ground perspective of each of our chapters. That doesn't change, and leadership consultants will still be a core piece of the chapter evaluation process, as will the chairman of field representatives. Other attendees taking part in the actual chapter evaluations meeting, which would continue to be held in the late spring, are the district directors, 3 of the content directors, a vice president, and then the chapter support services staff at headquarters. And the district directors would be, and content directors would be reviewing reports from each of their individual specialists. So those district directors, as the center of that hub, will be looking at all of the trends in their district, all of the high points, the low points, anything happening with their chapters in the district, and then coming to chapter evaluations with an evaluation of each of those chapters. It's a similar process to what the RDCs do today, although in the future a district director would be evaluating 10 chapters versus some of the RDCs today have to evaluate 24 chapters. So by listening to all of those content specialists, they'll have a very, very good take on what the specific needs are of those chapters during that conversation.
Thank you, Ella. And I think also we have that same, I don't think we do, we have that same vision for training school for when our leadership consultants come back to Columbus to be trained. That same model would apply. All right, so let's move on to this next question. The plan has 27 additional volunteer roles. How are we going to find those people? How are we going to train them? One of the biggest surprises for the Long Range Task Force when we started this is that on our website, there was no opportunity for someone to identify themselves as wanting to volunteer. There was nothing on that homepage that said, you know, want to volunteer for CAPA, click here. And when we look at other NPC websites, almost every other NPC group has that right on their homepage. We were also shocked to discover that there was no database, no place where any of this information had been housed. It was more of word of mouth. Oh, I met this person here and they said they'd like to volunteer, and you know, let's appoint them to this position. And we didn't know anything really about this person except they were nice and they were CAPA. And, you know, it was great if they succeeded in that role, and it was a bummer if they didn't. So first and foremost, the recruitment piece. There are a lot of things that have already been put in place because it's good practice. We have a volunteer interest form, which is going to be online, and it allows members to say, this is how much time I have to give to CAPA, this is how much travel capability I have, these are my talents and my skills, these are the areas of CAPA that I would love to contribute. I would really like to do ritual and history, I'd really like to do strategic planning. And then that is going to be linked to your member profile. So if you've never signed on to the CAPA website, you might want to try it. And there you have a page, and it has all of your information on there. And part of that will be your skills and things that you would like to volunteer in. So that's part of the recruitment. There is going to be a volunteer recruitment campaign in the fall, and we're going to really focus on getting people to identify themselves as somebody who would like to volunteer. What I think is really cool is that hopefully by fall we will have a widget, which is like a little cool buttony thing on, did you like that technical term, on the homepage. And so when you go to CAPA.org, it'll say, hi Logan, welcome. You live in Rolling Hills Estates. There are 6 volunteer opportunities available. And it can be anything from a local chapter needs initiation help to the Alumni Association is looking for officers, to a volunteer position at a national level. And so we believe that all of these different things are going to allow us to be able to recruit more volunteers. How are we going to train them? You know, and I should also say, when we took the plan to regional leadership conferences, so that meeting that was in the spring of 2015, the undergraduate women that were there that I met were so excited and so blown away by the number of volunteer opportunities that were going to be available to them after graduation. And so here, going back to that statistic about that demographic of 20 to 24 are least likely to volunteer. And these women that I met are in that demographic, and they wanted to volunteer. If they could have signed up right then and there to say, I want this job when I graduated, they would have done it. They were so excited about that. And so I truly believe that we are going to have a huge pool of volunteers, which is fabulous, because some of you might have out there been a province nominating chairman in the past, and you might have had the difficulty identifying people to fill that leadership role. Or you might be on an advisory board right now that has vacancies, or a house board. And so we're really going to be able to tap into a wider pool of people in terms of volunteer recruitment. In terms of the training, so some of the things that are already on the calendar or in process, we are planning for a large-scale training for new district directors and content directors in late summer, early fall. That training would include job-specific training in content areas, training in reporting and processes, document and resource overview. It also will include soft skill training, creating volunteer life balance. I think we probably could all benefit from volunteer life balance, or the volunteer work-life balance. Crucial conversations, team building, coaching teams, and then also culture and governance structure training will be provided. So that is already in the process of being created. Secondly, we are already piloting aspects of this program. Some people have said, you know, why can't we slow this down and why can't we pilot it? Well, we've been in this for 3 years, and there was already a need for it, as we saw in 2000 with the task force that was put together then. And we've been piloting it. And as you heard from Carol Sanders tonight, it's been very successful. So we have specialist teams in standards, in philanthropy, in Panhellenic, in academic excellence, in ritual and history. We already have this, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback. And we're learning a lot also. We're learning a lot about our chapters, and we're learning a lot about our associations. But we are piloting it. So because we have these teams that have been in place already, we've created the training for them. So that onboarding training, which include the webinar training, monthly conference calls. It includes operational elements. And so there is training that will occur. We've already piloted it. So if and when this passes, we don't have to create the training. We've already created it. As we've already mentioned, the districts will be divided among the new presidents, and that communication piece will be brought into the training. I shared our vision for the Associate Council Seminar, the ACS, so that training that will happen in June of an odd year. And we also then have a transition team that we would like to put into place, or that will be put into place if and when the proposal passes, that will help monitor the training pieces and the training needs of our volunteers. So we're really excited about this because we've never had a volunteer piece like this. And ultimately, the appointment of the volunteer is based on the CAPA who is doing the appointment. So the academic excellence content director will look at everybody who meets the skill criteria and the time commitment, and she'll say, I would like these 14 people. These are the 14 people that I would like to appoint to the specialist. And then Fraternity Council approves those appointments. But it's the content director who's doing the appointments. She knows what she needs for her team. Same thing with the, all the way down the line, the advisory board, the standards, risk management, et cetera, et cetera. So it's that CAPA who's going to do the selection and appointment of the volunteer. Amanda, I would be happy to stop for questions at this point, if we had any.
We do have a few that have come in. So we have one question around the PDs that were appointed in 2015 and what happens to their positions.
If the proposal, the new structure passes at convention, then the province director position, and this year's a little bit different because of we're going to be creating some specialist teams. Like, we don't need to create a standards specialist team, but we need to create a leadership development team. And I will ask Suzanne to correct me if I'm wrong on this. But that province director position kind of disappears because we're going to be putting these specialists into place. I can see she's unmuting herself.
I'm trying. I'm sorry. Yeah, if the proposed new organizational structure is passed by the convention body, then the province directors as we know them today will no longer be effective. And the new structure would go into place, which would then facilitate the election of district directors, etc. So those province directors who were elected during this last year were informed that this was a possibility, that very feasibly their terms would be for just 1 year versus 2 years. So I think we tried very hard to set that expectation, knowing that there was no way to predict with certainty what was going to happen at convention. But that is the plan.
Okay, thank you. Logan, do we still have time for more questions?
Yeah.
Great. We have another question regarding whether it's going to be the VP's role to work directly with the district directors. Will they be divided amongst the vice presidents?
Yes and no. So the 14 district directors, when they send their reports to Fraternity Council, will be sending that info. So 2 to 3 district directors will send to 1 vice president, who will then review those reports. But we want to be careful about one, keeping those lines of communication open, but we also want to make sure that the vice presidents are not getting into the operational day-to-day things when we really want them to be looking at the strategic plan and the vision and the future of the organization. That division of, I'm a vice president and I'm going to have alpha, beta, gamma would be decided shortly after convention. And like now, when we elect our regional directors at convention, we don't elect, Logan Tutel for Region 1 and Carol Sanders for Region 2 and Molly Bechtel for Region 3. We just elect them, and then Fraternity Council decides where they're going to be placed. And that's how it will work with the district directors. So those 14 district directors would be elected and then assigned a district. So then after that happens, then those 14 district directors would be divided, and it would be, Pi, Kappa, and Iota will report to this person, and Theta and Alpha and Delta would report to this person.
Okay, and we have one more. We've been talking about how younger grads will be able to be involved. Will there still be the 2-year waiting period?
I had a feeling that question was going to come up when I shared that. That ultimately is a fraternity council decision, and I know that it is on their radar to look at ways to bridge that gap in terms of waiting those 2 years. So I know that it's something that they are looking at and considering. I don't know how quickly that will happen. But, wouldn't it be great? Sorry, never mind. Okay. So the budget impact. So for adding 27 new volunteers, what does the budget look like? And I'm going to pass this off to Ella because she's the numbers person.
Don't let my spreadsheets fool you.
Oh.
So because we have additional volunteers in the structure, and because training is going to be such an important part of not only the future structure and its success, but also of the transition to the new structure, we are expecting an increase in spend rate for the next biennium. And specifically what that means is that each year we spend a specific percentage against what our investment portfolio is. So for 2017 and 2018, we would anticipate to slightly increase that, but it would go from 5% to 5.5%, so only a minimal increase for that biennium. During that time, as we've seen for the last many years, collegiate enrollment is increasing and our collegiate membership is increasing, and with that comes increased per capita fees. Paired with that, we've seen an increase in royalties year over year. So we anticipate that while there will be a slight spend increase for the next biennium to bridge this gap, that by the time 2018 comes, that our membership growth will have increased enough to cover that slight increase in spend need. And at that point, we would go back to our 5% against our portfolio spend rate. The additional amount that we would be gaining would not only cover volunteer training, it would also cover for those 27 additional people attending things like Regional Leadership Conference, convention, and allowing us to do more specific training outside of just the traditional training events, which were very fixed budget line items. That's the Associate Council Seminar, Convention, and Regional Leadership Conference. So with additional dollars, we'll have the ability to have more custom training and to make sure that the new team and new structure is as up to speed in all important areas as possible. And just in any new initiative, in any business or organization, there's some upfront investment that's required. But as I said, we anticipate that it's a short-term bridge and that by 2018, we'll be back at our traditional spend rate.
Thank you, Ella. I am not a money person or a math person, which my husband does not always appreciate. A lot of people have asked about the plan for transitioning to the new structure, and we've talked a little bit about this as we have gone through the presentation. There is a plan to have a transition team that would be made up of task force members and experts in the different content areas, and this group would monitor the transition, ensure that bumps are smoothed out as they come up, to monitor the trainings and to provide that viewpoint or the rationale of the task force in creating the proposal. As I mentioned also earlier, we already have specialist teams in place. So Carol talked about hers. So there's philanthropy, Panhellenic, standards, membership, risk, and academic excellence, and ritual and history. So those chairmen and directors have those teams in place, and we're really seeing an impact of those in a positive way, as I have shared. Kind of behind the scenes, things that we're doing to get ready, we are updating the leadership guides. So if and when the proposal passes at convention, those leadership guides would be ready for chapters for the fall. Forms are being reviewed and updated. So again, if and when the proposal passes, when we start in August or September, we have forms that are ready to go. Province directors and regional directors are reviewing materials. They're sorting paper documents, they're saving electronic documents, they're sending paper documents to headquarters to be scanned or stored. So there's a lot of, again, behind the scenes prep work that is happening in case this, or if and when the proposal passes at convention. The fraternity ritual chairman, Suzanne Vanderheyden, is reviewing fraternity ritual to determine what, if any, changes will need to be made if and when the proposal passes. Nancy Foland, who is the fraternity treasurer, has prepared a budget, as we just talked about, for the fraternity, what it would look like under the new structure. And that would, as we've talked about, include training for new volunteers. We also, as we've talked about, planned those meetings, and we're starting to put together the trainings for the district directors and the content directors and specialists, as well as refining the trainings that we already have created. So there's a lot of work that's being done to get the fraternity ready for this transition, and then to guide the fraternity through a transition period as we move to this governance model. So another one of the questions that we have received is about the headquarters staff. And as the task force was reviewing the volunteer structure within the fraternity, Carrie Kittrell, who is the executive director of the fraternity, was looking at the headquarters staff and reevaluating the structure of the staff and trying to figure out how the headquarters staff could better support the Kappa volunteer, and to create an opportunity for volunteers to get back to the volunteering, the mentoring, the guiding, the advising, the planning, and not so much this day-to-day operational that many of the volunteers are doing. And if we as a volunteer, if we are allowed to focus on that aspect of it, then that's such a benefit for us, for the people that we're working with, and then also for Kappa as an organization. To give you some examples of what I'm talking about, the chapter services coordinators have been able to assume, and those are women that work at fraternity headquarters, they have been able to assume 35 hours of administrative work for our fraternity council members, which allows them to concentrate on that planning, on investigating, on decision making, and to really do what we want them to do and what we expect them to do and what we hope that they are doing. Compared to other NPC groups, we have a small staff. 95% of NPC groups have a chapter team or or a position on their headquarters staff. 72% have an alumni relations team or position. 54% have a housing team, and 50% have an extension team. So when we look at the ratio of volunteers to our staff, we're looking at a ratio of 5 to 1. So for every 5 CAPA volunteers, there is 1 headquarters staff person. So again, we have been and we always will be a volunteer-directed organization. But as we want to focus on the positive aspects of giving back to CAPA, and I think many of us would define that as the advising, the planning, the moving the organization forward, we need the support of the fraternity headquarters staff. If we add in advisors and house board members and association officers as part of our volunteer base, then that ratio increases from 5 to 1 to 65 to 1. So 65 CAPA volunteers to every 1 person at headquarters. So you might have received an email today from the fraternity regarding the staff hires. And so here is kind of a snapshot of what was in that email. Excuse me. We are proposing, or not the task force, but the fraternity is a total net gain of 4 employees. So we have hired a chapter services coordinator. There is a marketing assistant who is a rehire and an internal communications specialist who is a rehire. The risk management coordinator moved from one department to another, and the copy editor was a new hire for this last biennium. For the 2016-2018 proposed staff hires, extension consultant, an alumni engagement coordinator. This alumni engagement coordinator would be someone who has the knowledge and expertise in terms of alumni. So, you know, a lot of colleges and universities have a similar position on their staff, and this would be someone that would be assisting the alumni relations specialists and the content director in that area. Also a house board specialist and an advisory board specialist. So those are the ones that would be proposed for the next biennium, and it would be 2 per year. We've also received questions about how voting on the proposed structure is going to take place. I would like to let everybody know that this is not a yes/no vote. We're not going to say how many of you are in favor of the new structure, how many of you are not in favor of the new structure. Instead, we vote on the proposed bylaws, and then it would be how many of you are in favor of this proposed bylaw, how many of you are not. At convention, for those of you who have been before, the schedule will look a little bit different. We will be voting on Thursday on the bylaw amendments, and the reason for that is because we cannot move forward with the other business of convention until we have voted on the structure. A bylaws workshop will be conducted on Thursday mid-morning, and a standing vote will be conducted on the bylaws, and a standing vote requires a 2/3 majority to pass. From our parliamentarian, for those of you who have never been to convention, we have a parliamentarian who is an expert in Robert's Rules of Order, and she has shared with us some of the procedural aspects, so I will share them with you. So Ann Rempel, who is our parliamentarian, has shared that on floor amendments to the proposed bylaws revision will be a majority vote. a pending amendment would be read, and the president would ask the voting body, those in favor say aye, those opposed no. If the vote is unclear, the fraternity president would conduct a standing vote. So that's kind of some of the, some of the things you might want to, or that you could expect to see in terms of the voting that will take place at convention. Which brings us to the next question. If the long-range plan doesn't pass, what happens? Well, we had an earlier question about province directors. Those province directors who were elected in 2015 would continue until 2017. The specialist teams would continue. So those standards, membership, ritual and history, academic excellence, those would continue to be in place. The volunteer interest form and all of the recruitment and the identification of skills and the widget, all of that would remain in place as well. So if the long-range plan doesn't pass, those are some of the things that would happen. We would continue to have regional directors of chapters and regional directors of alumni. We would continue to have a fraternity council that is made up of content area portfolios, like a director of membership and a director of standards, as opposed to being a content director. So, Amanda, before we move on to the last question, sorry, do you have any questions for me?
I do. One is, how will the structure of the Alum Association be immediately impacted with the new organization plan?
I don't know that the structure of the Alumni Association would be impacted immediately. I would think that an Alumni Association could wait a year or two before restructuring themselves or changing maybe their officer titles. Maybe they would want to create positions that more closely reflected the specialists. Right now, my Alumni Association has a membership officer, and maybe not everyone does. So I don't know that it needs to be immediate, and we're not asking alumni associations to change their structure. But certainly if an alumni association felt like there would be a greater opportunity for them to be successful if they changed their structure, then that would be great. And that would be something that they could work with their alumni relations specialist on doing.
Great, thank you. And we have one last question. Currently, the PDCs and RDCs send a pre-assessment to the LCs. Will content specialists have an opportunity to contact the LCs prior to their visits? And will content specialists be able to request visits for chapters with needs in their specialty?
Great questions. And this is what I would say. And Ella and Suzanne and Carol, please hop in and help me answer this question. I would say that let's go with the request from a district for a leadership consultant. That would be, if a membership specialist wanted to have that focus, that would be a conversation with the district director and the specialist, or the specialist and the content director, that this is an area that we need this visit in. And in terms of that pre-report, I'm not entirely sure. My recommendation would be that we use the key reports for that.
Logan, can I jump in here?
Yeah.
That's what's going to be the beauty of the new structure, because the district directors will be in constant communication with their specialists around the hub. And they will have that meeting of the minds as to exactly what those previews for the LCs need to entail and need to look like. So the district director will be responsible for communicating information about chapters to the LCs prior to their visits. And as far as coordinating visits for chapters, that's going to be a function of the content directors and the district directors collaborating on what's going to be in the best interest of the chapters, where the highest needs are, where the priorities are. So that's going to be something, again, where the content directors are going to be collaborating with those district directors.
Thanks, Suzanne. Amanda, I have time for one more question from you if you have one, or then if not, I'm going to move on to the last question in the presentation.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Okay. So a lot of questions about fraternity plans for the headquarters building, and I will allow Suzanne, as the Fraternity Council representative on the phone tonight, to answer this question.
Sure. I think, first of all, it's very important to note that the proposed new organizational structure and the headquarters question are very different issues and completely separate issues. We will need to address the inadequate space and infrastructure issues at headquarters regardless of what happens with the proposed structure. We have put on hold for the time being making any decisions so that we would be best able to take the time to listen to our members and to gather sufficient additional information about the various options and further study the financial implications of the different options for our headquarters. A survey that was generated by Clara Vista, an independent marketing firm, has been sent out with a very good response so far. And the results will be shared with our membership once Clara Vista has analyzed the data for us. For the last 6 months, the architectural firm of Moody Nolan has been looking at options to create new office space on the existing footprint where our current headquarters are located, with a detailed cost analysis that will be compared with a proposal to build a new building somewhere else in the Columbus area. CAPA volunteers with financial experience will be reviewing all of these numbers for us. We hope that everyone will feel free to contact any council member if you would like to discuss this matter. We are here to listen, and we are completely open to your thoughts.
Thank you, Suzanne. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen and engage in tonight's conversation about the Long Range Plan Task Force proposal. You can continue to follow news and updates on the plan on the womenwhocapa.org site. You can subscribe to receive updates or just continue to check back to that site when it's convenient. The Long Range Planning Task Force will be at convention in San Diego. We hope that you will come up and introduce yourself so we can put your face and your name to the people on the other end of the webinars. If you have any specific questions, please feel free to reach out to me, Logan Tutel, at womenwhocapa@kkg.org. And thank you again for being on the call tonight.
Thank you, Logan, Suzanne, Carol, Ella, and Molly for leading the session, and thank you for your participation tonight. If you have any questions or comments about tonight's topic, you may email the presenter directly at womenwhocapa@capa.org. As we close the webinar, a survey will open on your screen. You will be prompted to respond to a few evaluation questions. Please take a moment to share your thoughts on tonight's webinar. If you have any additional questions or comments, please send an email to education@kkg.org. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.